40 species held their breath, but Ruth Adler did not. She stood alone at the accused podium in the center of the Galactic Tribunal chamber. The massive room stretched upward for hundreds of meters, filled with floating platforms where delegates from across known space watched the proceedings. Blue light fell from above like judgment itself. High Arbiter Drellian towered over the chamber from his central throne. His insectoid body clicked and shifted as he read the final verdict. His species, the Kelori, had ruled the tribunal for 3,000 years. They had seen countless species rise and fall. Humans were just another temporary annoyance. The colony designated New Brisbane, Drellian announced, his translator turning clicks into words, is found guilty of unprovoked aggression against 3 registered merchant vessels. The sentence is cleansing. The human population of 2.3 million will be removed. Removed, such a clean word for orbital bombardment. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some delegates looked away. Others leaned forward with hungry eyes. The hegemony military commanders smiled at each other. Fleet Commander Yano, a broad reptilian figure covered in ceremonial medals, nodded with satisfaction. Ruth Adler stood perfectly still. The display screens around the chamber showed her vital signs. Heart rate, 62 beats per minute. Stress hormones, baseline. Perspiration, none. The monitors had been installed specifically to capture human terror for the entertainment of certain species. They showed nothing. Drellian tilted his massive head. This was unexpected. He had seen humans before. They were emotional creatures. They screamed. They begged. They made threats they could not keep. This one simply stood there like she was waiting for a transport shuttle. Does the accused wish to make a final statement? Drellian asked. Ruth looked up at him. She was 58 years old with gray streaking her dark hair. Her face carried lines from decades of difficult conversations. She had negotiated hostage releases. She had talked desperate people away from terrible decisions. She had sat across tables from killers and never blinked. This was just another table. I have a question, she said. Her voice was calm, conversational, like she was asking about the weather. You may ask. I would like the names of the admirals commanding the cleansing fleet. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Yano's booming voice echoed loudest. She wants names. Perhaps she wishes to send them thank you cards. Drellian raised a limb for silence. You wish to know who will destroy your colony? Yes. Admiral Yano commands the fleet. His subordinate commanders are Admiral Thesic, Admiral Brennell, and Admiral Corvus. Drellian leaned forward, curious despite himself. Why do you ask? Ruth pulled a small device from her pocket, a simple notepad. She wrote each name down carefully, her handwriting neat and precise. When she finished, she looked back up at the High Arbiter. Thank you, she said. I request a 3-day recess to inform my government of this verdict. Drellian studied her. His compound eyes could detect the smallest tremor, the faintest chemical signature of fear. He found nothing. The human stood before the death sentence of millions as if discussing trade regulations. Granted, he said slowly, 3 days. Ruth bowed her head politely. I appreciate the tribunal's consideration. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every eye followed her until the great doors closed behind her. Yano leaned toward Drellian's platform. What was that? No threats, no weeping. Drellian did not answer immediately. He had lived for 400 years. He had sentenced 17 species to extinction. All of them had raged. All of them had bargained. All of them had shown fear in the end. This one had asked for names and said thank you. Increase security around the fleet, Drellian finally said. Security against humans, Yano laughed. They have no military worth mentioning. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are outdated. They are merchants and farmers. Increase security, Drellian repeated, and monitor all human communications. On the human diplomatic vessel's steady hand, Ruth Adler walked through the airlock and sealed it behind her. Lieutenant Dara Okonkwo waited in the corridor. The young woman had the same calm expression as her ambassador. What did Earth say? Dara asked. Ruth handed her the notepad with the 4 names. Earth said to give them exactly what they asked for. Dara looked at the names. She nodded once. I'll begin the files. Ruth walked toward her quarters. Behind her, Dara was already accessing databases that officially did not exist. Admiral Yano, Admiral Thesic, Admiral Brennell, Admiral Corvus, their homes, their families, their secrets, their fears. Humans had been in the galaxy for 50 years. They had been quiet, polite, unremarkable. They had asked questions and smiled at the answers. They had taken notes. So many notes. The tribunal thought they knew humans. They had seen the merchant ships and the farming colonies. They had measured human weapons and found them lacking. They had looked at humanity and seen prey. They had never thought to ask what the prey had been doing all those quiet years. Ruth entered her quarters and sat in the darkness for a long moment. 2.3 million people, her people, sentenced to death for defending themselves against slavers. She closed her eyes and took one slow breath. Then she began to work. The message arrived on 18 worlds simultaneously. It was not marked urgent. It carried no warnings or threats. The header simply read, "Informational notice from the Human Diplomatic Corps." Most species almost deleted it without reading. Those who opened it did not sleep well that night. Ruth Adler sat in her small office aboard the Steady Hand, composing the 19th message. Her fingers moved steadily across the interface. Each word was chosen with precision. Each sentence was polite, devastatingly polite. Dara entered with a tablet. The Netari information broker is requesting contact. She sounds frightened. Let her through. The holographic display flickered to life. A serpentine creature with 6 eyes appeared. Her scales shifted colors rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in her species. Her name was Trill, and she had sold secrets across the galaxy for 60 years. Nothing frightened her. She was frightened now. Ambassador Adler, Trill hissed, what have you done? Ruth looked up from her work. I sent some informational notices. Would you like tea? I have a blend from Earth, quite calming. You sent navigation data for hidden Netari breeding worlds to 17 governments. Those locations have been secret for 2 centuries. I merely ensured transparency in these troubled times. Ruth's voice remained pleasant. Knowledge should be shared, don't you think, in the spirit of galactic cooperation. Trill's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. You're threatening us. I'm sharing information. The Netari have always valued information. Ruth smiled. I also shared your personal financial records with 3 of your former clients, the ones you cheated, I thought. Might appreciate knowing where you keep your assets. Why, the Netari have done nothing to humanity. No, you haven't, and you won't. Ruth leaned forward slightly. Consider this a demonstration. We've been watching everyone for 50 years, Trill. We know where everything is hidden. We know who owes what to whom. We know secrets that would collapse empires. What do you want? Nothing from you. I just want you to tell others what happened today. Tell them the humans are sharing information. Tell them we're being very helpful. Trill stared at her for a long moment. Then she disconnected without another word. Dara raised an eyebrow. She'll tell everyone. That's the point. The door chimed again. Ruth checked the security feed and saw a small figure waiting outside. The Pelori were a timid species, often used as translators and servants by the larger powers. This one was Counselor Brix, who had shown sympathy during the trial. Ruth opened the door herself. Counselor, please come in. Brix scurried inside, her round eyes darting nervously. Ambassador, I came to warn you. The tribunal will not change their verdict. Yano is already preparing the fleet. You cannot win this. Sit down, Brix. Would you like something to drink? No, thank you. Brix settled onto a chair, her small hands clasped together. You don't understand. The hegemony has crushed dozens of species. Their fleet is massive. Your people have nothing that can stop them. Ruth poured 2 cups of tea anyway. She set one in front of Brix. Your people have a resistance network, hidden bases in the outer systems. ships disguised as merchant vessels. Bricks froze. How do you? We've known for 30 years. Ruth sat down across from her. We never told anyone. The Pelori resistance fights against slavery. We respect that. We've actually been feeding you information through back channels. Did you never wonder how you always seemed to know when hegemony patrols were coming? The small alien's mouth opened and closed. That was you. We help our friends quietly. We've been making friends for 50 years, bricks, quiet friends, small favors, useful information, nothing anyone would notice. Ruth sipped her tea. Now we're calling in those favors. But the fleet. The fleet will do what fleets do. That's not the war we're fighting. Ruth pulled up a display showing hundreds of data streams. This is the war we're fighting. Information, secrets, leverage, every corrupt official, every hidden account, every buried scandal, we know all of it. Bricks looked at the data flowing across the screen. You've been spying on everyone. We've been paying attention. There's a difference. Ruth smiled. We came to the stars expecting friendship. We found politics instead, so we learned the game. We just played it very, very quietly. A notification flashed. Ruth checked it and nodded. Admiral Yano just received my message. What message? Ruth turned the display so Bricks could see. It showed a recording of a young alien girl singing at what looked like a school performance. The attached note read, "Your daughter has a lovely voice. She sang this at her school performance last week. We have excellent acoustics on our observation posts." Bricks's fur stood on end. You're threatening his family. I'm complimenting his daughter's singing. Ruth's expression did not change. I would never harm a child, but I want him to understand something important. We see everything. We hear everything. We are everywhere he thinks he's safe, and we've been there for a very long time. He'll be furious. He'll be afraid. Fear makes people make mistakes. Ruth finished her tea, and frightened people look for ways to stop being frightened. Brick stood slowly. What happens if they attack anyway? Ruth was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost sad. Then we stop being polite. Admiral Yano could not stop watching the video. His daughter singing at her school, a simple performance, a happy moment, and the humans had been there, watching, recording, from somewhere his security had never detected. He played it again. The audio was perfect, better than the official school recording. The humans had been close, so close. His communicator buzzed. Admiral Pellax, his superior, appeared on screen. The older reptilian looked tired. Yano, we have a problem. I know I received their message. Not just you, everyone received messages. Pellax rubbed his eyes. 17 of our secure military frequencies have been compromised. They've been listening to our communications for decades. Every battle plan, every strategy session, everything. Yano felt cold. That's impossible. Those frequencies use rotating encryption. The humans broke it 30 years ago. They just never told us. Pellax leaned closer to the screen. It gets worse. Our intelligence division did an audit. Those boring human merchant ships, hidden sensor arrays in everyone. Their cultural exchange students, trained analysts with perfect memory. Every human we let into our space was watching us. How did we miss this? Because they wanted us to miss it. They played stupid. They played weak. They let us think they were nothing. Pellax shook his head. We've been living in a house made of glass, and they've been standing outside with stones for 50 years. Yano slammed his fist on his desk. Then we attack now, before they can use what they know. And what? Kill 2 million farmers while they release every secret we have. Pellax's voice was sharp. Think Yano. They haven't fired a single weapon. They haven't made a single threat. They're just sharing information. If we attack, we look like monsters. If we don't attack, they keep sharing. They've trapped us. The next morning, Ruth Adler's request arrived. She wanted a meeting, in person, on Yano's flagship, alone and unarmed. Every advisor told him to refuse. It was obviously a trick, some kind of human deception. Yano agreed anyway. He needed to see this creature. He needed to understand. Ruth arrived exactly on time. She wore simple civilian clothes, no weapons, no guards. She walked through his ship like she was visiting a friend. They met in his private office. 2 guards stood at the door. Ruth sat across from him and smiled pleasantly. "Thank you for seeing me, Admiral. You threatened my daughter." I complimented her singing. She has real talent. Ruth folded her hands. "I would never harm a child. Humans don't work that way, but I wanted you to understand something. That you've been spying on us. That we've been everywhere for a very long time and you never noticed." Ruth's voice stayed calm, friendly even. "You see us as prey, Admiral, small, weak, easy targets. You sentenced 2 million of my people to death because you thought there would be no consequences. There won't be. Your ships can't stop our fleet." "You're right, they can't." Ruth leaned forward slightly. "But ships aren't the only weapons, Admiral. Let me tell you what happens if your fleet moves." She began to speak. She talked about bank accounts. Secret accounts that Yano's government used to hide money from their own people. She knew the account numbers. She knew the amounts. She knew which officials were stealing from. Which programs? She talked about political rivals. She knew their secrets too, scandals that had been buried, crimes that had been covered up, weapons that would destroy careers. She talked about military secrets, ship positions, defense codes, patrol schedules. Everything the hegemony thought was hidden the humans had found. "We don't want war," Ruth said when she finished. "War is loud, messy, people die. We prefer quiet solutions. We prefer everyone walking away alive." Her eyes met his. "But if you make us loud, Admiral, you won't enjoy what you hear." Yano's scales had gone pale. "You're bluffing." Ruth reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small data chip and set it on his desk. "That contains the personal financial records of every officer on this ship, including yours, including the payments you received from the slaver guilds to look the other way when their ships passed through your territory." Yano stared at the chip like it was a venomous insect. "The slavers that attacked New Brisbane," Ruth continued, "were operating under your protection. We know, we've always known. We were going to handle it quietly, diplomatically, but you forced our hand." "Get out," Yano whispered. Ruth stood. 3 days, Admiral. In 3 days, the tribunal's deadline expires. You can launch your fleet and watch your career burn, or you can find a reason to delay. The choice is yours." She walked out, her footsteps echoed down the corridor, calm, unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. That night, Yano ordered the fleet to launch. He told himself it was strength. He told himself he couldn't let humans dictate terms. He told himself the hegemony would crush them and take their secrets by force. He tried not to think about the data chip sitting on his desk. Ruth received word of the fleet's departure on the 3rd day. Dara stood beside her, waiting for orders. "They're really doing it," Dara said. Ruth nodded once. Her expression did not change. "Then we answer." She pressed a button on her console. Across the galaxy, messages began to send. Files began to open. Secrets began to spill. The quiet was over. The hegemony fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel with weapons charged and targeting systems active. 47 warships, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Admiral Yano stood on his command bridge and waited for the fear to begin. New Brisbane hung in space before them. Blue oceans, green continents, a world full of humans who were about to learn what happened when lesser species defied the hegemony. "Begin scanning for population centers," Yano ordered. "I want primary targets within the hour." His sensor officer worked the controls, then stopped, checked again, looked up with confusion on her face. "Admiral, I'm not detecting any life signs." "What?" "The planet is empty, sir. No human biosignatures anywhere." Yano pushed past her to check the readings himself. The screens showed nothing. No cities lit up. No communication signals, no thermal signatures of civilization. New Brisbane was a ghost. "That's impossible. 2.3 million people don't just disappear." "They're gone, sir, all of them." The fleet spread out searching. They found the colony infrastructure intact. Buildings stood empty, vehicles sat abandoned. Food still waited in storage facilities, but every single human had vanished. They had evacuated. Somehow, in the 3 days since the verdict, they had moved over 2 million people off the planet. Human ships weren't supposed to be capable of that. Human logistics weren't that advanced. Except apparently they were. Another lie. Another thing humans had hidden. Yano's rage boiled over. Target the colony anyway. I want nothing left standing. Sir, there's no one there. I don't care. They don't get to mock us with empty cities. The fleet opened fire. Orbital bombardment rained down on abandoned buildings and vacant streets. The humans had left their colony to be destroyed, but they had taken themselves beyond reach. And then the galaxy began to fall apart. On the hegemony homeworld, 3 major banking centers reported catastrophic system failures. Trillions in currency vanished from secure accounts. Not stolen exactly, just relocated, moved to accounts that would take years to trace. The stock markets crashed within hours. On Station Meridian, an anonymous message appeared on every public screen. It contained the private communications of 40 tribunal judges. Bribery, corruption, secret deals with criminal organizations. The messages spread faster than anyone could stop them. Riots began by sunset. A hegemony weapons depot in the outer systems suffered a mysterious explosion. The official report called it a malfunction, but security footage, also anonymously released, showed the depot's own automated systems activating the self-destruct sequence. Someone had reprogrammed the computers, someone who had been inside those systems for decades. Admiral Thesic, one of the fleet commanders at New Brisbane, received a message from his wife. She thanked him for the vacation package he had arranged. She and the children were having a wonderful time on the resort world he had suggested. Thesic had not arranged any vacation. He tried to contact his family. The resort confirmed they had checked in the previous day. Voluntary, happy, no coercion. They simply showed up with reservations made in the Admiral's name. They were safe, they were comfortable, and they were very far from hegemony space. The message was clear without anyone saying it. We could have done terrible things. We chose kindness instead. Think about that. Across the galaxy, similar incidents multiplied. A corrupt official's secrets exposed here. A hidden account emptied there. Small fires, but so many of them that no one could put them all out. Ruth Adler broadcast on open channels. Her face appeared on screens throughout known space. "We don't want anyone to die," she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "We never wanted violence. We just wanted to live in peace. You wouldn't let us. So now we're going to keep being helpful. We're going to share everything we know until everyone agrees that leaving humanity alone is the simplest option." She paused. Her eyes seemed to look directly at every viewer. "You have our colony, you have our buildings, you have empty streets and abandoned homes. Was it worth it? Was destroying nothing worth everything you're losing right now?" The broadcast ended. Yano stood on his bridge, watching his fleet bombard empty ruins. His communicator kept buzzing with reports of disasters spreading across hegemony space. His officers kept looking at him, waiting for orders that would fix this. He had no orders, he had no answers. He had captured a ghost and awakened a storm. Back on Station Meridian, High Arbiter Drellian sat alone in his chambers. The sounds of protests echoed from the streets below. His fellow judges had fled the station or locked themselves in their homes. A soft chime announced a visitor. Drellian checked his security systems. All of them showed the corridor empty. No one was outside his door. The door opened anyway. Ruth Adler walked in. She carried a small tray with a teapot and 2 cups. The tea was steaming. It smelled like something from far away. "Hello, High Arbiter," she said pleasantly. "I thought we might have a proper conversation now." Drellian looked at her, looked at his security screens, looked at the impossible woman standing in his private chambers. "How did you get in here?" Ruth set down the tray and poured 2 cups. We've had access to Station Meridian systems for 40 years. We helped design some of them, actually. Your engineers never noticed." She held out a cup. Steam rose gently from the surface. "This is from your homeworld, your favorite blend, the one that hasn't been available since your planet's civil war 50 years ago," she smiled. "We saved some. Shall we talk?" Drellian took the cup with trembling limbs. They talked. Drellian had ruled the tribunal for 112 years. He had spoken with kings and criminals. He had negotiated treaties that shaped civilizations. He had never felt as small as he did now, sitting across from this quiet human woman. The tea was exactly as he remembered, the taste of home lost for half a century. "How?" he asked. "We sent aid ships during your civil war, medical supplies, food. Your people thought we were just being kind." Ruth sipped her own tea. "We were being kind. We were also collecting samples, seeds, cuttings, genetic material. We preserved what we could." "Why would humans care about calori tea plants?" "Because someone might want a cup someday." Ruth set down her cup. "That's what we do, High Arbiter. We pay attention. We help where we can. We save things that might be lost. We've been doing it for 50 years and almost no one noticed." Drellian's massive compound eyes studied her. "You could have built weapons instead, warships, armies." We did build some actually, hidden away, just in case." Ruth's expression remained calm. "But we learned something a long time ago on our own world. The strongest army can be defeated. The biggest empire will fall eventually. But information lasts forever. Relationships endure. Favors are remembered." "So you built a web instead of a wall?" "Something like that." Drellian set down his tea. His old bones ached. He was tired in ways that had nothing to do with age. "The slaver vessels that attacked New Brisbane," he said slowly. "They belong to political enemies of mine, rivals who want my position. The trial was designed to weaken humanity before you became too influential in galactic politics." Ruth nodded. "We know. We've known for 8 years since the first plans were made." "You knew and you did nothing." "We were going to handle it quietly. A scandal exposed here. A rival discredited there. We were going to take apart the conspiracy piece by piece without anyone knowing humans were involved." Ruth's voice carried a hint of sadness. "We prefer subtle solutions. No one dies, no one suffers. Problems just quietly resolve themselves." "But we didn't give you time. You accelerated everything. You forced a public trial. You demanded blood." Ruth met his eyes. "You made us choose between our principles and our survival. We don't like that choice." Silence fell between them. Outside, the station shook as another protest turned violent. Drellian's world was crumbling and the humans sat peacefully in the ruins. "Where are your people now?" Drellian asked. "The colonists from New Brisbane." "Safe, protected." Ruth smiled slightly. "Do you know the Pelori Resistance, the Netari Information Guilds, the Brevari refugee networks, 17 different groups that the hegemony has tried to crush for centuries?" "You're with them." "We've been helping them for decades. Medical supplies, intelligence, safe routes through dangerous space, small kindnesses that added up over time." Ruth spread her hands. "When we needed somewhere to hide 2 million people, we called in our favors. They answered, every single one of them." Drellian understood. The humans had not been building an army. They had been building an alliance. A hidden network of grateful species, each owing small debts, all of them ready to help when the call came. "That's impossible to coordinate, the logistics alone." "We're patient, we plan ahead, we keep very good records." Ruth refilled both cups. "The hegemony sees strength as ships and soldiers. We see strength as friends who trust you, who will hide your children when danger comes, who will share their food when yours runs out." "And now?" "Now those friends are watching. They see what you did to us. They see what we did in return. No weapons, no violence, just truth spilling out everywhere." Ruth looked at him directly. "They're learning that the quiet ones are more dangerous than the loud ones, and they're deciding whose side they want to be on." Drellian felt very old. He had played the game of empires his whole life. He had thought he understood power. this human, had shown him that he understood nothing. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Ruth reached into her pocket and produced a single sheet of paper. She slid it across the table. Drellian read it. Full diplomatic recognition for humanity, mutual defense treaties, an official apology to the people of New Brisbane, seats on the Tribunal Council, everything humanity had been denied for 50 years. "The tribunal will never agree," he said. Ruth smiled. It was a small smile, almost sad. "Check your messages, High Arbiter." Drellian accessed his communication system. His compound eyes widened. 14 tribunal judges had already agreed. 5 more were negotiating terms. The coalition that had ordered the trial had collapsed overnight as their secrets spilled into public view. Those who remained were scrambling to save themselves by supporting human demands. "You arranged this," Drellian whispered. "While you sat here drinking tea with me, you were destroying my government." "I was having a conversation with you," Ruth corrected gently. "My people were destroying your government. I just wanted to give you a chance to be on the right side of history." She stood and straightened her simple clothing. "The vote happens tomorrow. You can support recognition or you can go down with the rest of them. The choice is yours." She paused at the door. "Thank you for the conversation, High Arbiter. It was genuinely pleasant." Then she was gone. Drellian sat alone in his chambers, holding a cup of tea from a world he had thought lost forever. Outside, the galaxy he had helped build was tearing itself apart. He drank the tea slowly. Then he began composing his vote. 3 weeks later, Ruth Adler stood in the same chamber where humanity had been sentenced to death. Everything had changed. The floating platforms were full again, but the faces were different. Many of the old delegates had fled or been arrested. New representatives had taken their places, many from species that had never been allowed to speak here before. Pelori diplomats sat where their masters once ruled. Netari observers watched from the upper galleries. High Arbiter Drellian presided over the session, but his authority was shared now with a council of 12 species. The old order was broken. Something new was growing in its place. Admiral Yano was gone. His own officers had removed him after their families received those anonymous vacation invitations. They had understood the message clearly. The humans could have hurt them. They chose mercy instead. That mercy was more frightening than any weapon. The formal proceedings began with an apology. The speaker was Admiral Pellax, who had taken command of the hegemony military. He read the words carefully, each one a knife in the pride of his species. "On behalf of the hegemony, we apologize for the unjust sentence against the human colony of New Brisbane. The trial was a manipulation. The verdict was a crime. We formally withdraw all charges and request humanity's forgiveness." Ruth accepted the apology with a slight nod, nothing more. The recognition treaty was signed next. Humanity received everything they had asked for: full diplomatic status, trade rights, seats on the reformed council, military protections that would prevent any future attacks. The old powers watched in silence. They had no choice. Too many secrets had spilled. Too many allies had abandoned them. The humans had won without firing a shot. When the ceremonies concluded, Ruth approached the central podium. She had asked to address the assembly. No one had dared refuse. The chamber fell silent as she stood before them. "You asked what the death toll would be if you attacked us," she began. Her voice was calm as always, steady, like she was discussing weather. "Here is the answer. We don't count our dead, we count our options." She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with species from across the galaxy. "You had ships, we had secrets, you had weapons, we had patience, you could have killed us, we could have destroyed you." She paused. "But nobody had to die, that was always the option we preferred." The assembly remained motionless, waiting. "My people learned something long ago on our own world. We learned that the strongest power is the power you never have to use. We learned that enemies become friends when you give them reasons to trust you. We learned that kindness, given freely, comes back multiplied." Ruth's gaze settled on Drellian. You tried to exterminate us because you thought we were weak. We showed you that strength doesn't require violence. We showed you that watching and waiting can be more dangerous than any weapon. Her voice softened. But we didn't come to the stars to be dangerous. We came looking for friends. She spread her hands. Remember this moment. When you think about humanity, don't think about what we could have done, think about what we chose to do. We had every reason to burn your worlds. We offered tea instead. The silence stretched. Then slowly the Pelori delegation began to tap their feet. It was their form of applause. The sound spread. Other species joined in their own ways, clicks, hums, rhythmic movements. Not everyone participated. The old powers sat in bitter silence, but enough joined that the message was clear. Something had shifted in the galaxy. The quiet ones had proven their strength, and many species were ready to stand with them. 1 year later, Ruth Adler retired. New Brisbane had been rebuilt, larger than before. The colonists had returned to find their homes intact except for a few bombed areas. Those were being reconstructed now, with help from a dozen allied species. Counselor Brix was the new Pelori ambassador to humanity. She visited Ruth often, bringing gifts and news from across the galaxy. The old networks of oppression were crumbling. New alliances were forming. Species that had been enemies for centuries were learning to talk. Ruth had built a small cottage outside the main settlement. She grew vegetables. She read old books. She watched the sunset paint the sky in colors she had almost lost forever. A young diplomat came to visit her one afternoon. Fresh from training, eager for wisdom. She had been assigned to negotiate with a new aggressive species that had entered human space. They're threatening our outer colonies, the young woman explained. They don't respond to normal diplomacy. Our military says we should show force. What do I do? Ruth poured 2 cups of tea. She handed one to her guest. Be patient, she said. Be polite. Make sure they know you're paying attention. And if they attack anyway? Ruth smiled. It was a gentle expression, but something ancient moved behind her eyes. Then you remind them why the quiet knife is sharper than the loud one. The young diplomat left with more questions than answers. Ruth returned to her garden. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields. In the distance, children were playing. Human children and Pelori children and others from species she couldn't identify from this far away. They ran together through the tall grass, laughing in different languages that somehow found common ground. Ruth watched them for a long time. This was what she had fought for. Not victory, not power, just children playing without fear, just a future where her people could live among the stars without hiding. She had spoken calmly when they threatened her world. The death toll had answered. 0. Not one human life lost. Not one alien child left without a parent. Not one drop of blood spilled in anger. That was humanity's true strength, not the ability to destroy. The ability to choose not to.